Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Collar here along with Andrew Krammer of the Star Tribune for our weekly hardcore breakdown of Vikings and Chicago Bears. And I think a pretty easy place to begin this discussion is our expectations for J.J. McCarthy versus the Bears defense. Here's what I noticed last week against Jackson Dart is that the Bears sent a lot of extra rushers. They sent Brisker, they sent Edmonds. They were actually blitzing kind of a lot and sending simulated pressures against him, which is not always Dennis Allen's thing. He's often on those charts with four-man rushes, but I think that they've realized, Andrew, that Montez Sweat can't do it all. Grady Jarrett looks like one of the worst signings of the entire offseason. There is nothing left there. Gervin Dexter is a pretty good player, but aside from that, I mean, they just don't have a lot of pass rush. So this is a week, I think, for J.J. McCarthy to have some opportunity if he could sort through the rushes, sort through some of the coverage stuff that you know Dennis Allen's going to mix and match, and have some clean pockets to throw to and bounce back from where he was last week.
Yeah, if he can remain poised before the snap, as Kevin O'Connell talked about in terms of the communication, the false starts, if he can remain poised after the snap like he did on the first or one of the first plays where Kyle Hamilton blitzed and he kind of sidearmed a 10-yard pass to Justin Jefferson on the side. There were moments against the blitz with the Ravens that he showed he's very capable of seeing it, very capable of making throws, but McCarthy also talked about the four batted passes at the line where he's stepping up into it, where he said he needs to work on his different arm angles to get the balls around defenders. This is all such a work in progress that if I'm a defensive coordinator, I think blitzing him might be the kind of roll of the dice that you're willing to make just to see how it affects him. We're also seeing that injuries with McCarthy affect him later in games, potentially the hand, which he said he felt in a fourth quarter in which he was very inaccurate with the right hand bruise, or the high ankle sprain against the Falcons that O'Connell talked about affecting his fundamentals and his footwork. So if you can hit him, if you can get him off his spot, if you can make him uncomfortable, McCarthy that is, I think it's a good approach for a defense. And it's going to be a good test for McCarthy because I do expect the Bears to try to throw some things at him, seeing how he did and did not react well to it last week.
I think the biggest key for me, and this is going to sound like, Captain Obvious here, but especially since it's been such a discussion, is when you look at this Bears team, you fully believe that you can run the football against them.
Yeah.
And when he came back in week one against Chicago, and he made some spectacular plays to come back, touchdown to Jefferson. There was a great throw off a play action on the sideline to Jefferson. Well done on the throw to Aaron Jones for a touchdown. All that stuff was really, really good. But the comeback began with some big Jordan Mason runs that got the offense going. And in this case, I think this is a team that is pretty vulnerable to that. Aaron Jones, getting Jordan Mason involved. Also, I mean, there is such a thing as shaming someone into doing the right thing, and the internet may be shaming Kevin O'Connell into focusing on the run, or we may just rewrite that narrative based on the fact that this is a team you can run the football against, and when you're trying to settle a young quarterback, I think that's the best way to do it is, and I wrote about under center and how Ben Johnson, one of his strategies for settling Caleb Williams is to go under center, to run the ball, to use some bigger personnel, play actions and stuff like that, where I feel like that is where they want to go with J.J. McCarthy, because if you're Kevin O'Connell, I don't think the run-pass ratio is the thing that you're thinking about late at night after the game. I think it's, how do I settle down my quarterback when he is so amped up trying to go win us a game that the balls are flying all over the place? Because if he could stay settled and calm early in games on those first 15 plays, he's been really excellent these last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and the run game is a great way to do it. So are throws to T.J. Hawkinson, which O'Connell was, I thought, pretty candid about and saying that we need to get him more involved. There are no excuses. And so when you go 7 of 23 on trying to connect with Jefferson and Addison like you did on Sunday, you got to find some underneath solutions. And you bring up the run game. The Bears' defense has not been great. They've given up 300, 400, 500 yards almost at times this season in games. And a lot of it has come on the ground. When you look at that defensive front, they look older and slower. I think when Andrew Billings is made to look the way that he did, he's their nose tackle against the Giants, it's more of an indictment of how bad the Giants' interior line is. Our old friend Austin Schlottman was starting at center for them in that game, and it didn't look well. I think it's going to look a lot tougher regardless if it's Brandell or or if it's Ryan Kelly back on Sunday, I do think the Vikings offensive line will look better than the Giants did at forcing Chicago off the spot. And then you saw what the Giants did with Jackson Dart's mobility. I wonder, you don't want to get McCarthy hurt, but you can absolutely use him as a weapon in this game more than they've used him against other defenses, because Jackson Dart had a 25-yard run on 3rd and 11. He had a 24-yard rushing touchdown, another short rushing touchdown. The Bears just could not, they were so focused on taking away the initial running back that they could not have much of a counter to stop the quarterback run. And I think a lot of that has to do with how they do not control gaps. They get moved off the line quite a bit. And then Tremaine Edmonds, as good as he has been running downhill, sideline to sideline, he looks his age a little bit.
And something that I can't help thinking about, too, from the last game with the Vikings was when he throws the interception to Malachi Starks and there's open space in front of him. I would like to see J.J. McCarthy stop trying to stay behind the line of scrimmage and look downfield when he gets out of the pocket, and instead just run and understand that if you get a 5-yard carry, it's a pretty good play. That's a positive play, and it's moving the sticks a little bit. I have felt like he has had those opportunities, but it's almost like it's pinging in his head. Try to make a play downfield. Try to give Jefferson or Addison a chance. Try to do something that is more than you need to do. He's taken some hits because of it. He's made some inaccurate throws or late throws because of it. Just run. And this team is not very good at stopping running quarterbacks, so there is a chance there, opportunity there. I think that there's been enough for J.J. McCarthy, that he has put on tape so far to then match up in our minds how he looks against Chicago and say, this might be the best chance of the year for him to have that breakout game where we're all talking about, wow, what a big performance that was, a momentum builder. This is the team that the opportunity is absolutely there for. This is the team and Joe Flacco's playing great, but what did Joe Flacco throw for? 5,000 yards in one game against them. I mean, what did Jamar Chase do against this team? They have lit them up. And even in the week 1 game, it was much more the Vikings' fault than it was Chicago's defense in the early parts of that game. I think if they had made some plays, if Jefferson doesn't drop a ball and so forth, if some guys had run the right routes, if they blocked a little better, I mean, in that game, with this offensive line version into week 1, and if everyone had been a little more sharp, I mean, you could have scored 40 points on them that night. The opportunity was there. I'm not saying that Chicago didn't do anything right. The opportunities were there. Take advantage of them this time, and everyone in the organization will feel a heck of a lot different waking up on Monday than they have throughout this week.
And I do think starting well running the ball is going to be huge, because you mentioned the comeback with Mason's runs in week 1. That was critical, but they did not run the ball well to start the game against the Ravens. And it was that third quarter when Kevin O'Connell made the calls that fans are mad about, that we asked him about many times in terms of why didn't you consider a pass there, what was going through your head on that call. And O'Connell didn't say it as much. He said, yes, we eventually ran the ball well in the second half, but you have to think that not running the ball to start affected why he wanted to turn to the pass in some of those short yardage moments. Don't give him an excuse if you're the Vikings offensive line or Aaron Jones or Jordan Mason to go away from you. You need to start fast in this game, get the run going, and then leverage that to make things easy for McCarthy on play action. You mentioned this could be a breakout type game for McCarthy. I think that could be the case if it is somewhat easy for him to get chunk plays. If we're talking 15, 20-yard screens, if we're talking catch and run opportunities, I do not think McCarthy's going to come out here and light up downfield the way that he tried to do against Baltimore. Jackson Dart had some good plays downfield. You mentioned Flacco, Jamar Chase. There have been quarterbacks who can throw downfield on them, but take the easy money and try to find some routine rhythm things with this young quarterback that they haven't been able to. I think if you come out throwing deep on him, you risk going cold and getting into some of the same issues that they've had.
So it's sort of funny about this back and forth, right? Because they came out throwing deep against the Ravens and hit a 62-yard play to Jalen Naylor. I think that this is a weird thing for me, is that the early part in the first 15 plays, for me, is the best time to take those shots. It's when he starts to get unsettled in the middle of the game, where you're off of the script, where if you start asking him to throw and throw and throw and throw, that's where it's gotten very spotty for me. That early in the game, it seems like he's had his accuracy and also his comfort with Those first 15 plays are the ones that you go over in practice, and this is your look, and this is your throw. Now just go do it. Even in the Lions game, he makes a really nice throw down the sideline. It's before he's gotten amped up and anxious about trying to win the game himself. But I agree with you that if you don't run the ball well, it's harder to do those shots because that helps everything. Yeah. What I would like to see Kevin O'Connell do is on the first play of the game, put in C.J. Ham and T.J. Hawkinson, Josh Oliver, Ben Sims, and then run a deep shot just to troll everybody. Like, just right off the bat, just to be like, hey.
Full 23 personnel. Deep shot to Ben
Sims.
Deep
shot to Ben Sims. Like, KOC ain't stopping, dog. That would be kind of funny. But
we should mention, like, the fact Josh Oliver is coming back for this game is going to be huge on the front of running the ball, on the front of O'Connell maybe leaning on it a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think that running with a 12 personnel and having Addison and Jefferson, but 2 tight ends in there, also allows you to do extra things blocking wise where there were some plays where there were simulated pressures that seemed to throw off McCarthy's pocket presence a little bit, and maybe that helps with some bigger personnel. But for me, if you're hanging on to one thing with McCarthy right now, it's that his decision making overall, where he has seen the play progress and where he's throwing the football, I don't think it's been horrible. I think it's been actually pretty good a lot of times. It's executing it on time and accurately. So if he was just making terrible decision after terrible decision, if he wasn't seeing where the ball was supposed to go, and then also this other stuff, I think you'd be a little more concerned. But I think it can be there if he gets into a rhythm, if he feels comfortable, if they can get an early lead. And then there's a defense here that to me is just not that impressive. They do have, some good players in the secondary, but not having Jalen Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, Nahshon Wright got the big play last time, and he's not a great player. We know that. He was here. Brisker is banged up. Stevenson's banged up. They bring in Gardner Johnson, who historically is kind of a splash player, but not maybe a great down to down. So that's the way I look at this for McCarthy, is that everybody's healthy. It's all right there for you, and this defense is going to give you opportunities to go win a game.
Yeah, it is. It's going to give you opportunities to go win this game. And if you're J.J. McCarthy, it is. It's about finding the rhythm, the operation, the calmness you talk about, not being too worked up. And I do think that this defense with Chicago is just lacking some of their top talent. Odenigbo was one of their best pass rushers in week 1. He's on IR. You mentioned Grady Jarrett and Billings on the interior, I think, can get moved. And then they look a little bit older on the front. And I think their best talent right now is still in the secondary with Brisker and Byard. Isn't Kevin Byard still there, isn't he?
He is. Yes, he is.
Yeah,
he's one of the guys that doesn't have a little Q by his name for questionable.
He's aging, but he's a savvy vet in the safety spot. But if you can bring those guys up, I do think there will be opportunities to throw deep on them and take those shots. And with how aggressive Chicago is too, maybe you can get something your way a little bit with the officiating. They got to try and draw some more contact penalties in ways that they just have not this year. They led the NFL last year in defensive pass interference penalties. Justin Jefferson has drawn just 2 in 9 games after drawing 14 in 17 games last year.
Wow.
It just has not – I think he was frustrated with the Ravens and with not getting some of those calls. I think that fed into kind of his – just body language and just kind of what he looked like on the field on Sunday. So I do think they need to try to still be aggressive in drawing those because it's such a big component of what they do.
This feels to me like and on FanDuel, the over-under for Justin Jefferson is 71.5 yards. This feels like one where anything short of triple digits is a disappointment considering where they're at and how badly they need to get him and J.J. McCarthy going, because quarterbacks in the past have not struggled to get Justin Jefferson the ball. If there's a sample size that keeps growing of him not having success, then the tension starts to build, because the one thing you've always had is that. So then you start looking around, what is it that's happening that's causing this? And even I saw Jefferson posting on his Instagram a little bit there of not putting it on himself, saying he needs to get back to when he was Offensive Player of the Year. But they also, as an offense and as a quarterback, need to get him back there, because I don't think he's running his routes differently than he was in the past. Let's go over to the Vikings defensive side. It was a performance last week that I thought they should be pretty proud of overall. It wasn't perfect. There's a few explosive plays in there, but they held the Ravens down for most of that game when the Ravens have 9 points at the end of the first half. Lamar Jackson doesn't even reach 250 total yards, 3.8 yards a carry for Derrick Henry. I think this defense is as good right now as we have seen them play all year long, that there's a lot of confidence and there's a lot of health that is going in their direction. The big question really is Jonathan Grenard. If Grenard is out, he's been kind of the number one chaser of Caleb Williams over the last couple years. But overall, the defense is in the best spot that it's been all season long.
I do. I think they've found some answers after getting just walloped in 5 days between the Eagles and the Chargers. They seem to have found some answers on their front. They're leaning a lot more on like their bare front, for instance, to take away the jumbo stuff that they're facing, where they put 4 defensive linemen in, drop Eric Wilson on the edge. If they don't have Grenard, which it seems like they're not going to, that is going to upend a little bit of the changes they've made. Because they want to put Wilson in on the edge, which brings pace in. I do think having 3 safeties, your top 3 back for this game, will help you on this front. Remember, Harrison Smith did not play in week 1. Theo Jackson has been out the last couple weeks. If you get those 3 guys in there, Metellus can drop in and play that kind of box linebacker role that allows you to keep Wilson on the edge. And I do think that'll allow them some extra versatility. But it's going to come down to Wilson, because I do not see Dallas Turner being the guy who's necessarily wrecking things from the edge. They've wanted Turner to be more of that kind of 3-4 end spot, where this sounds counterintuitive because he's not the most physical guy, but they put him more on the inside, where it's just control one gap, limit your responsibilities, don't think too much, and just react. When they put him on the edge, it seems like he's picking and choosing his spots not consistently, or at least not as consistently as the all-pro, Pro Bowl level of Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. So there's just a big drop-off there without him, and that's the one question I've got against a Ben Johnson offense that is still really creative, really good in the run game. They lean on their counters. They will put you out in 11 and then motion Kmet into an I formation and run for an 8-yard touchdown like they did against the Giants. Like, they can do a lot of different things to bait you into personnel groups and get the advantage that way. And so I wonder how much Flores is going to say, you know what? I'm going to stick in my base. I don't care if you put Odunze, Burden, all these guys out there. I'm going to stick in my base and try to force you to beat me downfield with, what I'm going to do up front.
I would like to see them every play have Jalen Redmond, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen all on the field at the same time with Levi Drake mixing in. And if Jalen Redmond has to play defensive end to set the edge, then you have to do that, because we've seen that opposing teams, when they have Dallas Turner in there, they're going to attack. So sometimes I've seen them try to spike him inside and things like that, which has worked sometimes for some TFLs or nice plays, but it's very clear that he is not at a point in his career where he's just going to set edge. Yeah. This is not a 270-pound defensive end with 10 years of NFL experience, and they know that. But last week, when we saw him play a little more free, drop back into coverage, almost tip a ball for an interception, get a phenomenal-looking sack, which ended up being negated, but one of his best reps of his career to get to the quarterback and sack Lamar Jackson at that point. When he is a little more free, I think we're seeing the Dallas Turner that they expected. But how they deal with it this particular week against the guy who really knows how to run, Darnell Wright is such a great player on the offensive line. I think he's been a total difference maker for them as a first-round draft pick. He's taken a huge step forward. And this offensive line is built to really run block. And that's where, if they can do that, then the Vikings are going to be at a distinct disadvantage against this team. Yeah,
and I do think the Vikings, the changes they've made with the Bear front, putting 4 defensive linemen in, and then when they don't, they're being hyper-aggressive still with their early down blitzes, their run blitzes. That stuff has helped. And I wonder how much of that is going to work against Chicago, when Chicago has the ability with a mobile quarterback and really good wide receivers to max protect, buy time, throw over the top, or just with Caleb running around back there and buying some time. So it is going to be more of a cat and mouse game, because it was interesting to see this week, Matt, that Lamar Jackson was not practicing on Wednesday. I don't know how healthy he was or how mobile they wanted him to be against the Vikings. I think this might be more of the test against Caleb that we thought Lamar was going to be, at least in terms of the mobile part, the ground game part. Obviously not as a passer, because Lamar is head and shoulders above. But I do think in terms of Caleb running around back there, we haven't seen them have to pin down that kind of guy since Justin Herbert ran around on them, 3 weeks ago. No, that's absolutely right. And Eric Wilson should be a huge part of this game plan as well, because he's one of the more fit for this. And will they spy with Blake Cashman after he pulled his hamstring the last time chasing around Caleb Williams? Will they try to do it with somebody else? A lot of factors there.
I couldn't be more impressed with Ben Johnson from an offensive schematic standpoint. I think he's done a phenomenal job getting Caleb Williams under center. And even though he came off like a total madman in training camp, I think that Caleb Williams needed a total madman. And I made fun of it at times. I'm sure you did too. Like some of the stories that were coming out of him pulling the entire offense off the field. You're like, okay, Tiger, let's cool it down a little bit. But also, someone needed to hold him to a standard of the NFL standard, not say, oh, yeah, sure, we'll put in your USC offense. Well, USC offense don't freaking work here. So under center, about 50% of the time under center, which is really wild to think about. And what Blake Cashman told me the other day in the locker room was that when they have him under center, everything is on the table. So the play action, the rollout, putting the extra people in, building the run off the pass. When you're under center, it's just different. There are limitations of being on the shotgun, even if you try to still run. So I think we've seen that from Caleb Williams. He is not executing everything that's there. The concern you'd have if you're the Vikings defense is their receivers are good, and we'll see about DJ Moore and whether he plays. Yeah. Their receivers are good. He's going to have opportunities to hit those receivers. In week 1, he missed probably 5 or 6 that would have won them the game easily. If he hits those, you're probably in trouble because you know he's going to make those scramble plays. And I think you know that they're going to be able to get at least something in the run game.
Yeah, they're going to need Isaiah Rodgers. They're going to need Theo Jackson when he's back there, Harrison, all these guys who are in deep coverage. And, you're hoping Josh Metellus is not put into those spots too often if you're the Vikings to play well. Because, this is going to be one where they can test you deep. Ben Johnson very well knows Brian Flores' pressures. He knows how to protect. He knows how to set up those 6-7 man protection schemes for his quarterback to take those shots. Even watching against the Giants, who have a very good defensive line, you saw how they try to design those things. And they mix it up really well, too. Like, they'll go from under center, boom, quick three-step drop into a 10-yard out to Odunze, and then they'll do the same look into a 7-step kind of rollout into a big, deep cross post concept or whatever that they're trying to do to hunt a play downfield. And Caleb is the kind of guy who you can see he's greedy, like he wants to search for those things. He has a low aggressive throw rate, so he doesn't put the ball into harm's way a ton, but he's looking for them. There was a 4th down early in the Giants game where he was looking, and unlike Aaron Rodgers on a rollout who could sense where his personal protector was and kind of maintain the right leverage and all those things, Caleb just kept rolling right into the defender and, ended up throwing the ball away, I think, under pressure for an incompletion, and he had missed an open check down on that same side. Like, that's the kind of stuff where a still young quarterback, second year, he's still learning and developing. And I think Flores, my guess is he should be able to bait him into some things that allow him to, allow the Vikings to kind of get his eyes looking one way and then maybe force him into some mistakes down low. But the off-schedule stuff is going to be key because they need to contain it. That is where he can win. And if he gets running around against some older Vikings defenders, we know how that can look.
So 2 more things on the Caleb Williams matter. Number 1, from a body language standpoint, he looks like a totally different human being and player than he did last year. When things would go sideways for him, the slumping on the bench in Minnesota was very clear. I thought he had a problem with this in college. There was a lot of walking off the field, kind of looking like frustrated or just more dejected than anything. And that's not going to fly very well even for a Vikings wide receiver that's a star. It's definitely not going to fly for a quarterback because I think it affects everybody. I've felt like his confidence has been a lot better when it comes to that and realizing that everyone's looking at him. And then in terms of late game, we learned this about him last year. Late game, Caleb Williams and this skill set almost reminds me a little bit of Josh Allen early in his career before he turned the corner, where they still won 10 games that year, even though Allen's throwing wasn't there yet, in part because anytime they would get the ball, needing a big drive, that scrambling, that playmaking, it just wins a lot of football games in those situations. And the Vikings, they almost gave it away back to the Bears, even in week 1, because Caleb Williams was able to find his way down the field and score a touchdown. So this is one where you are never really done with them until you're done.
And how do we see this Flores Vikings defense get consistently beaten? It's by mobile quarterbacks who are protected by either their own feet or a really smart protection plan and good offensive line. And it's all about beating pressure. And the Vikings doubled down on pressure this offseason. They said the pressure is going to beat the coverage. You saw where the money went in terms of the personnel. Can they do that? Can they pin him down? Can they contain him in a way that it feels that everything we said about Lamar Jackson going into last Sunday, we expected Lamar to look a little healthier than he did and more mobile. I feel like we're saying more of the same stuff this week, but even more earnestly because Caleb Williams is younger, obviously a little more of a live wire in terms of trying to contain him. But I do think that the answers to beating this defense are buying time and then finding the throwing lanes that they'll give up downfield, and that's why containing him is so important.
Pressure, you say? Well, let's talk about the pressure on these two teams. Actually, hang on a minute. Should we talk about the special teams? Because it's been a huge factor the last couple of weeks. And we usually don't break down special teams much unless something is on fire. But did Miles Price try too hard after having such a huge game against Detroit? Maybe it's random. He's just trying to, go down and doesn't protect the football enough. But then another fumble after that. Yeah. This has become a play in the kickoff that is now majorly impacting the results. 2 weeks in a row, I believe if they don't get a 61-yard return to start the game against Detroit, that maybe McCarthy doesn't have the start he has. And if he doesn't fumble against Baltimore, it's 12-10 with them having the ball. And it completely changed the game. So where do you stand on their approach to kick returning, how aggressive Miles Price has been, the penalties and the mistakes that they've had on all that, but also there's a high end to that as well.
I love it. I love how aggressive they've been. I think Miles Price has been a complete revelation for them. Somebody that even, who was it? Was it Wes Phillips? The offensive coordinator, I think, was asked about Miles as a receiver going into training camp. And even Wes was like, going into the season, we were all kind of like, let's see how this goes with a rookie returner. And he's been great. And yes, he had his rough moments against Baltimore. And I'm sure some of that had to do with pressing. He talked about, I am taught not to brace myself. If you're getting caught up or upended, just go down with the ball tucked high and tight. And obviously he didn't do that. He said it's second nature. You put your arm out if you're about to fall on your face, which is what he did. Funny enough, he said the guy who caused the fumble was a fellow rookie who was his training partner down in Florida. He said, I hate that it happened, but I'm glad it was him that did it. I do think he's going to learn from this. And he's shown that he's a guy who learns from these things and doesn't get fazed by the mistakes, which is the biggest part. That's why he's such a good punt returner, because he's not fazed by whatever crap's happening in front of him. And I think he's going to learn from that and not have it hang over his head. And I want them, and I think it's great that they're so aggressive in terms of giving him the almost ultimate green light outside of the situations where they don't want to for game strategy or whatever. They've given him the ultimate green light to search for a 109-yard kickoff return if he can finally get one.
Now, on the punting element of this, I think this is something that the Vikings have to really think about a little bit more when it comes to how they're managing a game in particular. When you talk about aggressiveness and running the ball, and I will always preface everything by saying this is a pass-first and aggressive coach. So expecting him to suddenly not be that is maybe a little bit unrealistic. However, Ryan Wright is punting so well this year by midfield and getting balls inside of the 10, inside of the 15, that I think they have to keep that in mind, that Caleb Williams probably isn't leading drives of 92 yards. And even when they were able to pin back Jared Goff, like offenses this year, okay, go back, a couple years. Oh, we got to go 80 yards, 2 passes, we'll get the drive going, run, play action off of it, take some shots. But in a league where you're starting at the 35 most of the time, or even better sometimes, and teams are running a lot and throwing short passes a lot, I don't know how many teams want to drive 90 yards. And this feels like so much is thrown back to 20 years ago in terms of just how we're talking about football. But I think that that's a fact, that teams are sort of built to, hey, if we get 4 or 5 first downs, we're in a field goal position now, and we don't have to travel the whole field. But they aren't built to, we're going to rip off 20, 30, 40-yard play like a few years ago when, Gary's dialing up all those play actions to Diggs and he's averaging 20 yards a catch. We're just not seeing that a whole lot. So I think that being a little bit safe at times and leaning on the fact that you have had a really good punter this year might be something they need to consider.
So not going for it on a 4th and 1 potentially from midfield, as Kevin O'Connell was considering doing against the Ravens before throwing on 3rd and 1. You don't want them doing that, is what you're saying.
What I would say is, let's say you get into, it's 1st and 10 at your own 40, and you hand off on 1st down and you get 2 yards. There's going to be a feeling of, all right, 2nd and 8, we need to pass, we need to be aggressive, we need to get an explosive, we need to get a 1st down. I think if you run again and get 4 yards and set up 3rd and 4, and if you fail there and if you have to punt, that's okay. And trust me, no one loves going for it on 4th down more than I do. I feel like I have reached heaven in the NFL where teams are just going for it often. And anytime a coach doesn't go for it, they are shamed on the internet. It's like, yes, we've made it. But at the same time, this is a particular team at a particular moment with a particular quarterback, and also the other quarterback. How many times has Caleb Williams in a drive hit 8 passes, 7 passes? Probably not that many so far in his career. Make him do that at times in this game. And I think having some trust in your punter for the first time, it was clearly developed, might make a difference there. But let's circle back to where I was headed with the pressure point. Which one of these teams is more under pressure to win this football game? And here would be, you might say, well, the Vikings, because they need this one to stay in the race. The Bears on FanDuel are now plus 700 to win the division, which, considering where they were at earlier in this season or going into the season, is pretty impressive. Not that far behind Green Bay and Detroit in the odds and right with them in the standings. But also they've been called maybe a tad fraudulent by some podcasters because they've had to win games at the very end. The Vikings, of course, I think season is more or less over if they cannot get a win here in terms of any chance for the playoffs. But I'm not sure where they're setting the bar for that right now. Anyway, so which one of these teams do you feel like is more under pressure in this game?
And I'm not allowed to say both.
And it doesn't work that way.
Does,
do you want to have like a percentage of like this 65-35?
It does feel like a push to me, maybe 55 Bears, 45 Vikings, because I do think Chicago is at that kind of, they're at that takeoff point where if they don't continue to take off, it is going to feel like, yes, it's all fraudulent. The 6 wins in the last 7 were just against bad teams. You can't even beat the Vikings on the road. I do think it would feel like you could undercut, as an objective fan or observer, you could undercut Chicago's progress with a loss a lot more, where the Vikings feel like they're more just trying to find their footing and gain some kind of notion of progress with their young quarterback. So I would say the Bears, but I think it's just slightly, because I think the Vikings team is still more talented than Chicago. I think they're still at this point a more cohesive and better coached team, even though they're finding their footing with themselves, with their personnel, and they're at home. And I think they should win this game. And that's why I think the Vikings have still plenty of pressure on them. And so does J.J. McCarthy in his 5th start to get back on track, show some progress, show some improvement, look good at home. And the bar for him is fairly low. It's don't get 8 false starts, maybe don't even get a couple, and show some progress in terms of the throws down the field, intermediate throws, over the middle of the field, catch and run opportunities, all these things, layered throws. Don't run from clean pockets. Don't step into deflected passes. These are all basic kind of things that I'm sure have kept Kevin O'Connell and this coaching staff up late at night trying to figure out how to get, as O'Connell said, some routine things down that we can turn back to and say, this is what we do well. This is our offense. So with McCarthy, I think the bar is fairly low, and that's why the pressure's on to see if he can do it.
I think with Chicago, if they lose this game and then start to tumble and they end up with 9 or 8 wins on the season, it's going to look like they didn't really actually make that much progress from last year. So they have a lot of, this is to them, sort of a proof of concept type of game.
I get it.
Like if they come here, beat the Vikings, and they are sitting there at 7-3, then they're going to be able to really puff their chest out and say, Ben Johnson is the man. This has worked. The whole tank to get Caleb and build this roster and tear it apart and build it back up. Everyone's a genius and all those things. If they lose, it's much more in question how genius everybody really is. That's the crazy swings of the NFL. And for the Vikings, I was having a chat with somebody in the locker room yesterday that was like, man, if we would just win this next game and then, you go to Lambeau with a chance and then you've got some NFC East teams that are completely out of it that you're going to face. This one is you could be right back in this conversation, 1 game away from the Bears if you win this game, and right in the discussion with a lot of other playoff teams. San Francisco has a good chance of drifting off, right? Like nobody's in the South that's any good. You're in a spot where I don't see Carolina really making a legitimate run the way they've been playing up and down. So I think the answer actually is both. Sorry, I'm going to tell. It was your rules that you couldn't go both, but I can. But there's a lot of pressure on both these teams. I think it's a huge swing game they could set up for the rest of the season. But the big question for Mr. Krammer, who actually is 100-0 in picking the
What?
games. Yeah. I went
just
back through all the
learning this.
podcasts
Who, me?
and never. Yep, you've never gotten one wrong.
That's
The Vikings on FanDuel are
incredibly wrong.
Okay, all right. Maybe there was one in there that I missed or deleted. The Vikings are 3-point favorites on FanDuel at home. Will they win this football game?
I did accurately pick last week's. So there's that. And so this might be the first time I try to get back-to-back correct picks for the week. I am going to pick the Vikings to win this game. I think they're going to win because while Caleb Williams does not put the ball in harm's way a ton, whether it's a forced fumble, maybe a rare interception, I do think the Flores defense, they're playing well. I think they get back to their takeaway ways against Caleb Williams at home. And I think a fast start by the Vikings offense helps them do that and forces Ben Johnson into a little bit more of a catch-up mode. We haven't seen a game script play out like that for the Vikings much this year, where they build a decent lead, actually force a team to come from behind. I like their chances to do that, and which is why I picked them to win by, it'll be one score because Caleb will come back in this game, but I think they'll hold on.
I don't know how many times I picked 27-24 as a score, but I'm going to try it again. I'm going to do it again. I think Vikings 27-24 with a very, very compelling and grip the edge of your chair type of game all the way to the end with Will Reichard from 61 to win it. But we'll see how
61.
it goes. Yeah, why not? I mean, it's a chip shot these days for somebody like Will Reichard.
With no cheerleaders on the field. Not like the halftime questions that you've been asking.
It's an inside joke. Don't worry about that. We'll do this again next week and preview Vikings and Packers. Until then, we'll see how it goes.
Football.